Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Frozen with Outdoor Adventures, and today I'm going to be answering some more of your questions. We got about 3 pages of this stuff, but if you have any more after this Q&A, I'll be happy to answer them. Just leave me a comment down below, and we'll get to it. If your question warrants a whole video topic, I'd love to do that, so seriously, just ask. How do you deal with critters big and small on the trail? Bears, elk, snakes, ticks. How did you stay safe when you encountered these? So I'd say the only real dangerous animal that I encountered on the trail was snakes. And that was really early on. In fact, I saw a rattlesnake, a rather big rattlesnake, my first day on the trail. I learned from past experiences, you kind of stomp your feet, let the ground vibrate. That's what they're very sensitive to, and see if they move. If not, you can roll rocks near them. Try not to hit them. I got a lot of flack because people thought I was throwing rocks at the snake. That wasn't the case. I was just rolling it past the snake, but it wouldn't move, and there was nowhere for me to go without potentially putting myself in dangerous situations. So you do have to, leave those headphones out. I talked about this in my electronics video. Don't listen to both headphones at the same time. You need to be aware of your surroundings when it comes to dangerous animals like this. There could be a black bear right next to you, and if you got some headphones and music in, you'll never know if that thing comes up and charges you. But I think rattlesnakes were the big thing. I did encounter, I want to say, a good 8 to 10 rattlesnakes within the first 700 miles of trail. As far as ticks, I was spraying my clothes with permethrin. You can pick those up along the trail. I wouldn't personally mail drop those at all. I didn't see anywhere near the amount of ticks that I saw as I did on the AT, on the PCT. How did you feel during the walk from the border to Manning? For me, I remember feeling more and more fatigued and less motivated. So that's interesting. I didn't feel any difference after I touched the border. I was glad that the trip was over. I was honestly exhausted from thinking about fires and how to get around them at that point. And I knew it was only 8 miles, 9 miles, 10 into Manning Provincial Park. The trail was supposed to be pretty overgrown. We didn't really encounter anything too crazy. I was pretty happy when I got to Manning. I was proud of what I had done. I was ready to see my family. I had a couple good friends around me at the time. The fatigue was a lot better this time around than my last through hike. I think just because I was eating more protein, I was eating better, way less sugar. I think that had a lot to do with my motivation. What was your resupply strategy? Good question. Mail drop versus buying. So I knew that there were going to be 6 to 10 mail drops that I wanted to do. Like some of the expensive places, like the resorts, like VVR, some of the South Lake Tahoe, some of the expensive towns. But what I had found after seeing some prices in Pennsylvania versus California, they're pretty different. And I was not used being an East Coast boy going out on the West Coast and having to spend almost double for groceries. My grocery bill ranged anywhere from $100 to $180, $190, which is quite different than out here. I found that even with having my wife go to Walmart and purchase the food that I exactly wanted, and then spending $20 to ship it to me via priority mail, via the post office, I still saved on average about $20 a resupply box, as long as I had 5 days or more in the box. This allowed me to do a couple different things that shopping at a supermarket really doesn't do. Now, the supermarkets were okay for the most part, but some of them absolutely just took advantage of the hikers out there. And so I was glad to have the resupply boxes pretty much the whole way up after I realized the amount of money that I was going to be spending. So if you're from the East Coast and you have, or a state that, prices are normal without all the inflation that's been going on the past few years, I do suggest if you have someone back home that can ship you boxes, that's what you do. It is absolutely easier to go into town and not have to worry about, okay, I need to go here, here, and here. That's where my boxes are. You can kind of mix up your trip if you're not doing a resupply box strategy. It'd probably be less stressful. But just getting into town and knowing that I didn't have to spend an hour, walking to the grocery store, getting my groceries, buying them, checking out, walking back to a hotel or the trail or whatever, it was just easier just to pick up a box at the post office and call it a day. The only downside of that is, I guess another downside of that is you have to make sure that the post office is open on the day you actually get into town. Some of the time it was a struggle getting a hitch and then trying to hit the post office before it closed at 4:30. So it's just something that, everybody's going to have to decide on their own. For me, resupply boxes work very well, especially in Washington. Washington was like, oh my gosh, there's like nothing here. And definitely, send yourself resupply boxes in Washington for sure. All right, so here's a really good question that I don't think any thru hiker has covered yet. Did you have to get a permit to be able to film on the PCT and monetize your videos? What was the process like, and what and where do you go to get these permits? So this is a good question. For those that don't know, let me catch you up. Last year, I think around November 2023, the National Park Service revisited a case in which a YouTuber won, basically saying that, this is my creative property. This has nothing to do with the National Park Service. I shouldn't have to get a commercial filming permit. Well, the judge of that case reversed the ruling on that. And it turns out that even if you're a one-person crew with just a tripod and a cell phone, you need to get a commercial filming permit to take any footage in the national parks. I was kind of worried because I needed the money from YouTube to actually, continue hiking. And I want to share my my trip with not only you guys, but my family. So, what do? Do I not monetize this hike? In which case, if YouTube does anything with any kind of that data and it ends up with an ad on it, I'm still held liable for that commercial filming permit. So I reached out to all 15 or whatever national parks before I started, and I waited about 3 weeks before I finally heard back from 2 of them. One of them was Lassen National Park, and the other one was Crater Lake. So the park rangers that actually gave a crap enough to respond to me about trying to do this legally, thanks so much. I appreciate you. I'm happy to pay a commercial filming permit for vlogging, but at least make it accessible and not so ridiculous, as the process required you to print out a 2 to 3 page application, very long. You had to describe all the equipment that you were bringing, if there was people in it, what location you were going to be there, the approximate date that you'd be walking through the park, how many days it would run, just a whole bunch of things that honestly nobody's going to read unless it's actually for a movie, right? Somebody, again, that's just bringing a tripod and a phone or a tripod and a camera should not have to jump through these hoops. But I did anyway, just to stay legal. And basically what those 2 park rangers told me from Crater Lake and Lassen was that it looks like you're using just a regular phone, a tripod. No one else is going to be appearing in the video. You're not selling a product. You're not talking about products, which I had to be really careful about in the national parks. And you're doing this based off your freedom of speech, which is exactly what I'm doing. I am talking to a camera and letting you know how my experience goes in that park via my freedom of speech. And they said this does not require a commercial filming permit. So though I did fill out all the right paperwork and send it in, the 2 rangers that got back to me sent a letter back to me saying that it was not required to get a commercial filming permit. So I took that as covered in all national parks because I didn't hear anything back. So that's what I did. So I don't want to tell you that just because I didn't need a commercial filming permit that, the next round of vloggers isn't going to need it. This may change, and it's currently in the court system being fought by many, many vloggers and influencers in the traveling circles, because that's their bread and butter. That's their livelihood. And I didn't say a lot about this when it came out because honestly, I thought it would be reversed pretty quickly. But yeah, it's just another one of those government unnecessary rules. Again, I don't mind paying a reasonable fee to film, but they wanted like $250 and someone to follow you around every day while you were in the park. So I'm glad that I didn't have to get one because it would have been just ridiculous, dude. All right, let's go on to the next question. How did you manage to pack out toilet paper? Did you use a bidet? TP is a big problem in the Sierra, and absolutely is a big problem in the Sierra. I saw it everywhere, unfortunately. Luckily for me, I didn't use any toilet paper at all. I carried some extra with me just to wipe down at night. But But for the most part, I used a bidet. Every time I had to go number 2, I always chose my bidet and buried the waste and didn't have to worry about it. I thought the bidet was great, not only for chafing reasons, because every time you wash your bum with the bidet, you're getting rid of all your sweat, all the grime back there, and it was very refreshing. The only downside about using a bidet was perhaps the desert in some sections in Oregon, where, you know, those long water carries, you're bringing 5 liters to camp. You just had to make sure that you had enough water, you know, to do your business in the morning or whenever. But I thought the bidet was great. I'll link my specific bidet in the description of this video below. And I think it's great. It's a great piece of backpacking gear. All right, what do you think is the most important piece of gear on the PCT? As much as I didn't want to carry this thing and I thought that I wasn't going to need it, having someone back home to help me with the fire closures and just what to do, because again, like I said in the last video, the PCTA wasn't very clear on their communication for fire closures. This was great, allowed my wife to help me figure out where we could go and get around these things. And if my life was in danger at any time, I did have the option for the SOS button. I think the next biggest and most important piece of gear is probably going to be your shelter. I chose a smaller shelter with the Z-Packs Plex Solo, and when we got really crowded due to all these fire closures pushing us together in one big giant group, it was very helpful to not have one of those you know, duplexes or Durston X-Mids that, you know, just take up 900,000 square miles of camping footage, you know what I mean? I could fit in the tightest spaces, and it really sheltered me from the wind and sandstorms and any kind of adverse gear. It was just great. All right, we talked about this briefly, but how did you manage ticks, poison ivy, and body odor? What were the percentage of times where mosquitoes, bugs were absolutely worse and nearly unbearable? Which locations and parts of the year? Yeah, so I forgot in my clothing video that I did bring a head net. I didn't use it much, but the times that I needed it, I was just so over the mosquitoes. It was ridiculous. I thought the worst round of mosquitoes were in Oregon. I got there around June, which I knew, you know, I was expecting massive amounts of mosquitoes. And I was thinking back to my AT hike through Vermont, where they were just completely unbearable. Bigfoot and I both were cursing up a storm at camp. I'll be completely honest. Bigfoot hated them way more than I did. You know, I had dealt with them in Vermont, like I said, so I knew what I was in for, but I don't think he had any idea of what to expect. Permethrin worked for a little bit, but honestly, DEET is your best friend out there. I didn't like putting DEET on just because, you know, it can eat through synthetic gear. I mean, it can put a hole in your tent if you're not careful. And just putting that on your skin is just, I don't know, man. The mosquitoes and bugs were okay for the most part with DEET and a bug net. And I think if you have a tent and you're not trying to cowboy camp, you'll be perfectly fine. Really, they were the worst around June and only around, you know, large bodies of standing water. There were a lot of lakes in Oregon that we passed, and those were the problem areas that I had on the trail. As far as body odor, you know, every chance you get, wipe down with a wet wipe, or, you know, I carried this towel on me. This is one of the things I got from Light AF that says, you know, hiker to town, hiker to trail or whatever. And I wipe down every night with this, wipe the man parts, you got the underarms, my feet especially. And you just sleep better when you're clean. So it helps with the body odor as well. Favorite 50 to 100 mile stretch? Man, I'd say anywhere in Washington, probably like 100 miles into Washington. Anywhere around there is beautiful. Oregon was pretty nice too. NorCal, Sierras, the desert section. There really wasn't a bad section of trail, but my favorite section was probably the Crater Lake area. That was absolutely gorgeous. It was life-changing for me, and I had a really good time there. All right, here's another great question, man. Thank you for putting this one out. This hike seemed harder for you emotionally than the AT, and it absolutely was. Did you find this to be true? And if so, why do you think it was? So Physically, the AT wrecked me. Physically, the PCT was a breeze after the Sierra. I think emotionally, I wasn't really prepared to walk through snow for 3 or 4 weeks. It was like 500 miles of snow. Granted, most of it was patchy. Snow and some of the dangerous slopes that we were on where you would literally get hurt if you slipped, they wear you out mentally. And then, finally getting the feeling of, okay, I'm off the mountain, we're down in the valleys. Now we got rivers to contend with or streams to contend with, which we kept hearing stories about people getting caught under logs or their feet getting under rocks. The current's too strong. We just went in a really bad time into the Sierra, and emotionally, the Sierra was the hardest thing I've ever done. After that, I started missing my family, specifically the 2-year-old that I couldn't tell that I'd be back. I didn't tell you guys this on the trail, but the PCT trailer video that I released, the announcement video, he was basically, my son Logan was watching that on repeat, and my wife would send me videos of him saying, Dada, Dada, hiking. And it got to me. It really got to me. And I feel like, if you're like me and you have an established family and you're trying to do a thru hike, be prepared for the hardest thing that you've ever done. Taking all physicality out of the equation, it was so hard mentally to get through this trail. Not because the trail was hard, but just wanting to be in 2 different places at the same time was emotionally destroying me while I was out there. I had a great time and I'm totally glad I did it. If I had a chance to do it again, I would, but it was rough. And by the end of the trail, I was absolutely ready to go see my family again. I think that's why it was harder for me emotionally than the AT, because the AT, I really didn't know my wife's kids, my stepkids, and I didn't have Logan. And, it was just a lot easier without a family. So a lot of people told me that I would regret being away. I think this has made me a better father, more appreciative for what I have here again, just like the AT thru hike. But for sure, it was very, very mentally draining this time around. How was the water out there? Do you have any favorite water sources that you encountered? Water was fine. I think I carried a max of 5 liters up to the Sierra, and then I dropped my capacity down to 4, where I lost my water bottle mid-Sierra in a stream crossing, which I feel bad about. I feel bad that I littered, but there was nothing I could do. I was shoulder deep in this water. I didn't really have a hard time getting water. So if you're hiking fast enough, you don't really need to worry about water. You need to be mindful of where the next water source is. But like places like Oregon, we only carried a liter at any given time. The desert, maybe 3 at the most all the time. Washington, 2. And Oregon, most of the time, 3. So yeah, water was great. I really didn't have a problem. But I can see that, if you're going southbound to the desert, water is definitely going to be an issue. And I'm curious, now that Murica has officially entered the desert section, my buddy from the AT, he's going Sobo. I'm curious to see how he deals with water. I am going to try to get him on a question and answer session when he visits me in December. I think we're trying to shoot for. So if that happens, definitely get him down here and film a video like this for you guys. We can kind of compare Nobo versus Sobo if you guys are interested. So you know what, let's start. If you want to have any questions for the both of us specifically, leave those questions down in the comments section. We'll blow through them when he gets here. All right, hardest mental obstacle for you on trail. I think we talked about that. Snow crossing, anticipation, fire closure, rerouting, crazy elevation and climbs. I honestly didn't really see any crazy elevation. It was way easier than anything I had done on the AT, where it's kind of just straight up and rock scrambling. The PCT has a nice, easy grade for the most part. Didn't run into anything crazy. I thought the trail was great. Semi-overgrown in a lot of areas. I don't think they have a lot of volunteers that can keep up with the trail, especially with all the fire stuff. The fire closures were definitely mentally draining, especially, the last one that we had skipped up. It was something like 200 and something miles missed in Washington. That was a little hard to digest, but it's just a part of the hike. You're not going to do an end-to-end PCT thru hike without a reroute. It's just not going to happen. That's not that trail. So if you're one of those purist hikers, you better be prepared for a very hard thru hike a potentially dangerous through hike trying to figure out where you're going. You're going to be walking on roads, which is why I really didn't care enough to figure out some of these ways where I'm walking a road for 70 miles. I just skip to the next closure. I'll go back and get them. I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, I think the snow crossings and fire closures, the biggest mental obstacle to get around, other than the family thing. I think that's enough for today. I got enough for 2 more question and answer rounds. But like I said, if you think I'm not going to cover something that you really want to know, hey, let me know down in the comments. I'll be happy to answer you. So I'll get this video out to you guys, and I'll see you in the next one, everybody. Thanks.